If you want to see how I made these amazing lamb kebabs with flatbread by MasterChef Theo, keep on watching. Okay, start this recipe off. I've toasted off some fenugreek seeds in a dry fry pan till nice and toasty. Now I'm just going to grind them up in my mortar and pestle to a nice fine dust. If you have a spice grinder, you could also use that. I just transferred my fenugreek that I ground up into a powder into this little container. Now, I'm not using labna, but I'm using this super thick Greek yogurt that I found at the store, so that should be just fine. We'll just add a little bit of salt to it. I think it's going to work just perfectly. So I'm going to add the fenugreek seeds. I'm going to add a couple of crushed garlic cloves and some olive oil. And we'll get it all mixed up, and then we'll jump on to the next step once this is all incorporated. So I couldn't find any lamb saddle at the store, but these pieces will work just fine. Also, lamb is super expensive in Austria, so if anyone lives in Austria, or in Vienna specifically, and knows a good lamb dealer that's not so expensive, leave a comment. So I'm just going to cut these into 4 centimeter chunks. So I'm just going to split these in half, and then we'll cut them into nice big chunks. So I got all my lamb cut up into, well, pretty much cut up into nice little chunkers here. So we'll get them all in the bowl, just like that. And then we're going to get our Greek yogurt olive oil mix, bang all that in, and then we're going to get this all nicely coated and mixed in, just like that. Once you get it all mixed in, we'll go to get this covered, and we'll set it in the fridge until we get all our other ingredients ready. Okay, next step, we got to render out some bacon. Now, the bacon in Austria is very different from the stuff I'm used to in Australia. And while I was at the store picking it up, I forgot to ask for it thick cut. So it's cut very thin, which shouldn't be a problem. But I'm gonna get them all laid out onto this baking dish with a rack over it, because all we're gonna do is render the fat, and we gotta keep the fat. But the best way to do that is in the oven. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna lay out a nice layer of bacon, just singly at a time, and then I'll go back and I'll just lay another piece on top. When I put this into a cold oven, as the oven heats up, it should render every piece at a good rate. I'm gonna get cracking on with that. Just laying out my last piece of bacon here. Now I'm gonna set this into a cold oven that will then turn on to 200 degrees without the fan. It's gonna take about 20 to 30 minutes to render all this fat out. After about the 10-15 minute mark, just keep an eye on it, making sure nothing's burning or scorching. But what we're after is all the fat that's collecting in the bottom of this pan. To make the nice creamy sauce that the lamb's going to sit on the plate, I've just already got my Greek yogurt and olive oil in my little mini food processor here. Simple enough, bung the lid on and process this until it's nice and smooth. So it's all incorporated, but as I thought was going to happen, it is a very, very runny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this tipped out into a strainer lined with cheesecloth, and we're going to let this drain a little bit of the excess water as we get the rest of the stuff. So I've got my strainer set over the top of a bowl. Just put my cheesecloth over the top, and I'm going to pour this straight in. Now while we get the rest of the ingredients together, that should hopefully strain out some of the excess water, and we'll be left with a nice thick creamy sauce for the lamb. Okay, to make the flatbread, I already got my water and olive oil into the bowl. I've said it before, I am a big fan of always putting your liquid into the stand mixers first. It just incorporates everything much, much easier. So, to that, I'm going to add my flour straight on top. I'm going to close the lid, turn this on a low speed. I'm going to get it all combined. So it's more or less starting to come together. And now I'm going to turn it on a medium speed, and I'm going to let it go for about 4 minutes. So my dough's been mixing for 4 minutes. Now we're just going to turn the stand mixer off. We're just going to throw a towel over the top, and we're going to let that sit for 5 minutes. So the dough's been chilling out here for 5 minutes. Now we're going to add the salt and just a little bit of water to start with, and then we're going to mix this until the dough starts coming away from the side of the bowls. We'll see if it needs a little bit more water. We'll just add a little bit at a time, but for the moment, just that little splash I think should be fine. So we'll turn it on and we'll get it mixing. I'm just going to give the dough a bit of a customary scrape, because I'm pretty sure once I do this, it'll be right where we need it. Alright, keep on mixing. I've had my dough mixing. After I scraped it down, it did start coming away, but I have the feeling it's just a little bit too wet. So I'm just going to add maybe 1/4 tablespoon of flour, and we'll get that mixing, and we'll see how it looks after that. Okay, after adding just that little bit of flour, I'm happy with how it feels. So after I let it rest in the bowl the first time, I shouldn't have added that splash of water, but I just added that little bit of flour, and now it's feeling good. We'll get this onto the work surface, and we'll just give a couple of little kneads by hand, making sure everything feels good, and you know, it's dough you made. You have to play with it a little bit, I feel. It is slightly sticky, but after we give it a nice little rest, it should be just fine. So I'm gonna get this into a nice taut little bowl. Let's stick that on this board. We're gonna throw a tea towel over it, and we're just gonna let that rest for about 10 minutes while we crack on with the other things. Okay, to make the green sauce, we're gonna reduce our sherry by a half. So instead of using a saucepan, I'm gonna be using my little milk jug here that I usually use for my coffee. I'm gonna bung the sherry in there, and I'm gonna get that on the stove, and we're gonna reduce it by half. To make the green sauce, quite simple. We've got 5 sugar snap peas here that I just ripped and pulled out the woody bits of. We'll bung them in. We've got a bunch of flat leaf parsley. Now, if you're ever wondering how much a bunch is, in Austria at least, they sell parsley in the supermarket in 50-gram packs. And once you pull all the leaves off the stems, it roughly works out to around 25 to 30 grams. So that's how much a bunch of parsley is. And a couple of garlic cloves that I've just crushed. Once you got all them in the food processor, we'll bung the lid on, and I forgot the bit on top that makes it blend. It's a very handy piece of equipment to, make it blend. All right, once you got it all set up, we're just gonna pulse it on and off until it's nicely chopped up. Once you got it chopped up a little bit there, we'll just scrape the sides. Now, if it was still quite chunky in here, I would blitz it a little bit more. But at the moment, I'm kind of happy where it is, because once I add the last few ingredients, we'll pulse it a little bit more, and then it should be the consistency I'm looking for. So, we're just gonna put a nice little bit of cracked pepper in there. We'll add a bit of salt. Now we're gonna add some vinegar. It says about 20 mils, but we're gonna freehand this and do it to taste. So, that looks about 20 mils to me. And we're going to add a tablespoon of the reduced sherry. We'll get this back on, we'll blend it up, and we'll give it a taste. As you can see, I've pulsed it up. I got the consistency looking pretty much where I want it. We'll just give it a little taste. Okay, after tasting it, I'm going to add another, we'll call it half a tablespoon of sherry, and a little bit more vinegar, and a little shake of salt. We'll mix that up, and then we'll see how we're looking. After just adding those things, I gave it another little mix. And it's exactly the seasoning I'm looking for. So I'm going to get this taken out of here and set it aside for when we're ready to plate. My dough's been resting while I've been preparing some of the other components. Now we're just going to cut this into 4 pieces, just like that. We'll get each piece and we'll roll them into a nice little bowl. Now I've got a little bit of flour here. I'm just going to lightly dust my work surface. Also a little bit on my rolling pin. I'll grab one of my dough balls. I'm going to roll these out to about 2 millimeters thick. Okay, once you got it rolled out to about 2 millimeters thick, I just poured the rendered bacon fat into here, and then I added some melted butter to bring it up to about 40 grams. Give this a good painting all over the dough, and then we're going to roll this up into a log. Once you get it to this stage, in your log stage after you've put the butter on it, you're meant to cut this into 3 pieces, and then stand this up, and I'm guessing you have to give them a little push down so they stand up properly. And then you roll these little individual pieces out. So I'll get a little bit of flour down, we'll give it a bit of a push, and we'll flip it over so it's got some flour on it. And now we roll this out to 2 millimeters thick. So it's about the size of a pikelet, I would say. Maybe a little bit bigger than a pikelet. And that's how they're meant to look. So I'll go through and get these other 2 rolled out, then we'll jump on to the next step. Once I've got them all rolled out here, it says to put these in a pan, but I've already got my barbecue preheating, so I'm going to use that instead. Alright, once you got a little bit of colour on one side, just go ahead and give them a flip. Keep on cooking them. As soon as they come out of the pan, or off the barbecue in my case, we're going to get this bacon butter and we're going to give them a good brush. As you can see, it's already starting to set up, but that'll be fine. These breads are nice and warm. They'll melt it and soak up all that good buttery, bacony goodness. So in the recipe, it states to use metal skewers, but I don't have any. But I had some of these chopsticks you get with takeaway. I'm going to try those. So I just had them soaking in some water for a while. I'm just going to poke it through. Yeah, looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and get them all poked on, and then we'll come back. So once you get your meat all onto your skewers, we're going to take them out to the preheated barbecue and cook them until they reach the internal temperature of 58 degrees. So I've got my little thermopen here. We're ready to barbecue. Okay, when your meat reaches your desired temperature, you're going to pull it off and let it rest. Okay, considering lamb's quite expensive here in Austria, this is a bit of a treat. I've been waiting for this all day. Oh, Get a little bit more of that green sauce scooped in there with it. I could definitely understand why he got the clap from Jock. That is absolutely amazing. I was a little bit, about this green sauce when I just tasted it by itself, but you mix it with all this. And also, if I actually use labna instead of the Greek yogurt, it would have been a little bit thicker. This would have been an absolute amazing dish. Don't get me wrong, still a 10 out of 10 dish.